There are times when you don't know what you need to do because there's crisis and huge uncertainty. During COVID, I would do everything I can to not lose a life. Two of our operating businesses, Banyan Tree is over 30 years old, Taiwan is over 70 years old, 10 to 20 year journey of Taiwan. We've got over 100 SKUs across all food and starch solutions. At least 30 to 40% of our revenue wasn't there 10 years ago. Built new revenue streams, new adjacencies, new countries. It really took at least a multi-year effort to start from a pilot and then you scale it. I was like, first year newbie rookie, 7-8 years ago, an Australian CEO told me,
they say legacy is about planting trees whose shade you may never sit under. And in many ways, that is the story of Asia. Welcome back to Billion Dollar Moves, your front row seat to the world of capital. I'm Sarah Chen-Spellings, your capital confidant and guide. And if you followed my journey, you know this is personal. I grew up watching family businesses quietly build empires through war, reconstruction, and reinvention. These weren't just companies, they were institutions that shaped communities, industries, and in many cases, the very lands we stand on today. So when we talk about the future of food, climate resilience, and capital in ASEAN, I wanted to sit down with someone who stands right at the crossroads of all of it. Ren Hua isn't just the CEO of Taiwan. He's the third-generation steward of a 77-year-old family enterprise that evolved from post-war tapioca trading into a regional agri-food and biomaterials powerhouse. In this conversation, we go deep. Legacy and reinvention, leading 3,500 people through crisis, inclusive and circular growth, and how ASEAN can build the next multi-billion-dollar platforms in food, energy, and water, the systems that will define the next 25 years. Because family businesses aren't relics of the past. They are and always have been Asia's blueprint for the future. All right, welcome to Billion Dollar Moves. We are in beautiful and very hot Singapore, and we're doing an outdoor shoot because we are one with nature in the beautiful banyan tree that's owned by your family, Ren Hua. I'm so excited to be with you. And of course, I was just telling you that your initials, as I was texting you today, I was like, hey, I'm going to meet HRH, His Royal Highness. Was this planned by your family? It sounds like they've got the family plans laid out from the family business. I mean, this is a random start, but let's go there.
So actually, HRH is actually the acronym is the similar initials of my grandfather. So my grandfather was like Ren Hua, and then I'm Ren Hua. Ren Hua stands for birch tree. My sister Ren Yong stands for banyan tree, and my brother Ren Chun stands for cedar tree. So nothing about Prince and Game of Thrones, but absolutely about the sanctity and the sacredness of trees.
I didn't know that about you.
Yeah, here we are surrounded by trees.
Here we are surrounded by trees.
Yeah.
And your parents have certainly built that into grounding all of the children in the family to also build a business. And I guess it stems from your name in some way.
I mean, a tree, you're very rooted. So I think it's you got to be rooted, and you got to provide shade, and you got to provide that prosperity and that flourish. But ultimately, you got to be rooted and unwavering. For a long-term family business, I think that groundedness in essence and values is important because you go through so much change, you go through so much challenges during the business. Two of our operating businesses, Banyan Tree is over 30 years old. Taiwan is over 70 years old. That essence and that vision and values are absolutely important for us.
Yeah. You come from a rich heritage, long and rich, from a legacy perspective, right? What you've built, what your family has built over the years. I understand that your grandfather was the ambassador
to Thailand
from Singapore, but met your grandmother, who is left brain, right brain, right?
Yep.
So she was
he was an agricultural economist, and he was an agricultural economist by training. She was a chemist by training. She did the lab. She did all the chemicals for starch and food. He was much more around agriculture, economic policy.
And they met in the United States and decided to build Taiwan after World War.
Both my grandparents, my grandfather grew up in Singapore, but obviously with the war, he went to school in China. My grandmother was born in China. They spent time in the US and then they came back. So actually they started doing trade, on different types of agriculture products. Right? So they did jute, they did tapioca chips. My great-grandfather had a business in tungsten. In the 50s and 60s and then 70s, subsequently, we built, the business in that context, right, around trade, primarily in agriculture, and then eventually food. Tapioca is one of the, more important strategic crops in Southeast Asia.
So it's a starch, kind of looks like a yam, right?
Yeah, it's underground. Yeah, it's a tuber. And then going into the 80s, I think my dad then started Banyan Tree, which is our, kind of like our sister company. When my parents then initially looked at an old tin mine in Phuket. and then they restored it. Today we operate over close to about 100 hotels across the world. It's one of Asia's leading, independent operator of spas, resorts and hotels. But the ethos and the history of Banyan Tree and Taiwan, I would say, is different business models, different operating environments, but there's a binding vision and values to build for decades. Right? So Taiwan has gone through 70 years of ups and downs and Asian financial crisis. I had to lead the company through COVID, which was very intense. One proof of success is not just the success, but one proof of success is how do you withstand through crisis, and how do you withstand through 5, 10, 15 years of the ups and downs. And that's where we are today. So Banyan Tree is in 100 hotels across the world. Taiwan operates in 8 countries across Asia Pacific. B2B food, consumer food, supply chain distribution, primarily based in Bangkok, but also we reach across our key markets, which today will include China, India, Indonesia.
Legacy gives you roots, but leadership demands reinvention. So I wanted to understand, when Ren Hua stepped into the 77-year-old institution, what did he inherit and what did he know he had to change?
So let's zoom in into Taiwan for a moment here. You came into the business about the time of the listing, I believe, the merger of two entities. Yeah, I mean, you were coming back from the US, right? You went to Penn. I mean, your grandmother didn't know that you were going to lead this business.
Yeah.
What was the family conversation about?
My grandma passed away in 2011 of an aneurysm, which means I never really got a chance to say goodbye. And she had no idea. She and my grandfather are a bit of a guardian angel. We have in some of our factories, they have like portraits of her. When we did our 70th anniversary, a couple of years ago, we had associates and our colleagues who had worked in a warehouse who said, they remember her from like 20, 30 years ago. She never knew that I would join Taiwan, but I think that guardian angel of values and really building for the next 10, 20, 30 years always stays with me. 2015 was an inflection point because we were merging 2 smaller companies. I think, a discussion with my dad, my parents, the family, and they felt that, I was passionate about learning 2 things, right? Learning the skill sets of being an operating CEO, which is very different from operating a country or operating a business unit because you are fully accountable for the ups and downs of the company. And that was at 32, 33 years old.
A family business doesn't survive nearly 8 decades without evolving, but evolution in agri-food across 7 countries and thousands of supply chain touchpoints is a different level of orchestration. Here's how Ren Hua built Taiwan from product to portfolio.
As a next generation leader, put into this position, being thrown in the deep end of the pool, we have to prove yourself, build credibility among staff that are, a lot of them are older than you. You and I talked about, one of the hardest things is firing someone who's much older.
So I think a lot of core leadership is forged through crisis, right? I think in leadership, there are many dimensions, right? You kind of know what you need to do, when times are good and okay. There are times when you don't know what you need to do because there's crisis and huge uncertainty, and there are times when you make mistakes, right? So one of the crucible moments came in the early part of COVID, that we were one of the earlier first wave of companies in Thailand to be extremely aggressive on the COVID response, right? So we would find as much gels as we could. I would lose money, use the supply chain, but with 3,000 people under us, I would do everything I can to not lose a life. And thank God we didn't lose a life during COVID. The other dimension I'll then add over the journey since, being from a younger CEO to now, more experience is just, constantly forming and reshaping the team. Taiwan's gender diversity and gender strength is one of the best in Thailand. Like 60% of my leadership is female. 52% of our top 100 are female. So we got like over 50. But they came to an evolution of many years of tweaking, adjusting, promoting to create a very strong leadership culture today that is, obviously you've got the gender diversity, you've got the gender strength, you've got age strengths. We lowered the average age of our top 100 talent from, I think it was about 48 and a half or 49 10 years ago to 42.
Wow.
So today, if you look at the top 100 managers and leaders and directors in Taiwan, the average age is 42, which is like, it took us 6-7 years to lower it down or to bring our, let's say, our gender representation of our female leaders from maybe 30%, 5-6 years ago, to 52%.
Yeah.
So those things mean a lot to me, right? Because when you shift a company, it's obviously the leaders at the top doing the leading and the delegating and the influencing. I think you judge the leadership of a company by the quality of its people. It's not about the CEO, it's not about the CFO. It's about when you look at our top 10, when you look at our top 100, are they strong? Are they young? Are they diverse? Are they competent? that really says a lot to the strength of the company. So I'd say to me that's the most important thing right now.
A recent conversation I've been having with some of the leaders that I work with as they're building their family business is, how do you hire the right people that you trust, that also understand the family dynamic?
A good friend of mine told me this a few years ago. I didn't really appreciate it then, which I appreciate it more now, having gone through a bit more experience and ups and downs. Here's you as a CEO, make sure at least more than half your team is better than you. The broader point is that the CEO cannot be the best person in the room. The CEO can be the most all-rounded, can be highly facilitative, can be extremely strong in this, but the CEO itself cannot be the limiting factor. So then that comes into how do you form a high-performing leadership team. You got to be prepared to make the wrong hires. You will make the wrong hires. 70% of the time you can find an A minus. That's fine.
Yeah.
And 30% of the time, you got to be prepared to make the B minus hires. And some of them, they don't work out in 3 months, they don't work out in 2 years. So the only way you know, or you kind of know in your mind that you're hiring A minus players for the long term is that if 30% of the time you're making mistakes. And that's fine. And you just
fire
move on.
Fast, hire slow. Do you agree with that?
Fire. Now I would say a bit more nuanced. I would say, well, we don't fire, we restructure, we reshape. I would evaluate long, but decide fast. So I'll look at someone for, let's say, 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, but I'll decide fast. It may not necessarily be a fire. Most of the time it'll be a non-promotion, but then once you make a decision, then you decide fast.
Yeah.
Reconfiguration is a skill, and it takes a lot of it's like dancing, right? You're kind of you're dancing with your team.
Yeah.
I've been very fortunate as well. I think my parents, my dad's chairman of the board. My mom advises me as well a lot around organization, social capital. The board is very strong. So we have now 4 independent directors on the Taiwan board. All of them are former CEOs. But that has also allowed me to the idea that the CEO cannot be the limiting factor. To have more experienced, more skillful, more accomplished leaders on the board helps me to just kind of keep my own performance in China.
It's one thing to grow, it's another to grow inclusively across farms, factories, families, and food systems. Ren Hua calls this the F4 framework. I wanted to know how he makes it real on the ground.
Of course, our common friend is Shamina Singh, who talks a lot about inclusive growth. As you're thinking about how you're building here, how do you ensure that what you're doing is inclusive versus extractive?
I mean, our sustainability framework and vision is built around what we call the 4 Fs, right? So farm, factory, family, and food. And each of them, I think they're clearly articulated, quantitative and qualitative goals. So when you think about farms and factory, how do you think about their long-term decarbonization journey, particularly around scope 3 emissions? That's a certain calibration and calculation. But we benchmark that, right, on the farm and the factory. The family part is a bit more natural to us because we have over, I think, 3,500 associates. We work with over probably at least 20,000 stakeholders. So, farmers, suppliers, community. So that's a bit more intuitive because it's on a day-to-day basis. So you can actually see it. Right? Taiwan is completely plant-based. In that broader theme, we work with crops, we work with farmers, we work with harvest, but we have to help them win to ensure the supply chain. Food distribution is key to us because to us, food distribution is a representation of food security.
Yeah.
And food security is just essentially how to get it faster, better, cheaper to our customers. And today, I think what makes us proud is that, when we see the demand signals, when we have food production coming from our factories, we can very quickly then map it to where the food goes, because we've got a very direct supply chain.
Yeah. So that brings us to sort of the micro of that being implemented. Of course, you're essentially bringing innovation and trying to build, the entire infrastructure, right? How does that look like in practice for a very old business? Are there frictions in trying to create this level of change?
There'll always be friction.
Yeah.
There'll always be friction. There's a certain 10 to 20 year journey of Taiwan, constantly evolving as a platform. They chop it up into periods of time. And again, the time duration, what we do is also dependent on what we're trying to achieve, right? So we are launching a major new factory next year that is a lot more sophisticated with European technology, a lot more circular with water, and it's much less kind of like chemical dosing. And then we're trying to look at the water affluency. Right? That's like a 1.5 year project. On the other hand, there are certain projects which we've been doing solar for many years already. We've been doing biogas for many years already, but we're constantly upgrading the milestones. But that's been around for like 6-7 years, and we'll continue to do that. Time horizon is quite important where you implement major projects, because certain projects are like 1, 2 years. Certain projects are more 5 to 7 years. You've got to manage pace You know, not everything happens in 1 or 2 years.
Yeah.
But not everything happens in 7 years, because there's no way you can then transform a company. As you know, China went through a very tough COVID, but then it emerged strong in 24, right? It bounced back. Right? Had we not built a China business 6, 7, 8 years ago, we wouldn't be able to recover from that, right? Because they would be very exposed only to Indonesia, Malaysia, Thailand, and so forth. Implementing different drivers at different time horizons also makes a company, I think, more resilient.
So curious, who do you today view as your key competitor? And are your competitors, you think, thinking in this sort of way of circular economy, sustainability frameworks?
We've got multiple competitors across multiple categories. So we are market leader in tapioca in China. We're market leader for Vietnam B2B products. So we're a bit of a hybrid animal.
Yeah.
Right? So obviously we've got tons of competitors who are, some of them smaller, bigger, the large, the giants like Cargill and Ingredion. In some ways they're competitors, but they're also suppliers and customers.
Yeah.
And the food ingredient world is relatively collaborative. In Thailand and Vietnam, certainly there are a lot of good local brands that we have to compete against, because Taiwan is a unique mix of B2B, B2C, circular economy, Asia-based multinational. So there's no benchmark of a Cargill, Nestle, Olam. We're a bit of a hybrid. And maybe that's why we can at least survive 77 years. That I think we want to grow
diversified portfolio.
Very steady. We don't aspire to like crazy growth aspirations, but we want to build like kind of like a rock solid company that can withstand market shocks, but continue to grow and serve what the world needs. And to us, it's really just food, energy, and water.
What was the biggest challenge? I mean, you've given me a lot of like good news stories, right? Like, bring us back to when it felt really hard. You were about to give up, even as you're like implementing all these new things.
Emotionally, I've become a bit more resilient over the years. So I think post-COVID, I become there'll always be business updates, right? It's good and bad, right? So you
updates. I like the framing.
Business updates, right? So, and we went through some tough times, right? I think 2023, after COVID, we had a tough first half. We were in the red. And then my dad said, we're all in this together. So the board was obviously pushing me to perform, to restructure, to reorg. But 6 months of a very tough performance because of external events, and my dad said, we're in this with you. And that I think is actually very important, right? Because as a long-term family business, you've got to withstand the crisis. Compared to 5 years ago, a bit more unshakable, but also understand that's because the broader leadership culture from the board and all that is there.
Yeah.
We spent a lot of time talking about risk. So we've still lots of gaping holes, right? We've got this problem, that problem. So there's a lot of risk management to do, because in manufacturing, there are constantly things to fix. It could be around your fire safety measures for your factory. It could be your wastewater effluency. It could be around cybersecurity controls, story markers. So there's a ton of risk management to do. But I think ultimately, if the spirit of the company is to be resilient, case in point, 2 months ago, we had to deal with a war because we operate one of the largest factories in Cambodia, tapioca-based factory, and then suddenly they're like, there's an update. And I just woke up and said, like 20 kilometers away, they're like mini bomb shells. I mean, you don't prepare for that, right? You kind of have a strategy plan for that. But of course, I said, going back, first thing, we need to take care of our people. So we evacuated the team, looked at local supply chain. But within 2 weeks, we managed to drive donations and community support to the local people. And today the factory is, back half running. So there are a lot of these things that happen. But I think, for us, what we care a lot about is response time. So something happens, we respond fast. And, the leadership team, we just, I tell them our job is to carry the company.
Yeah.
Rain or shine, we just got to deal with it.
Yeah. So next time I'll call you, I'll be like, what's the business update? Now I know the framing.
Yeah.
And what makes you, in your opinion, the number one market leader for, say, tapioca in China? Are you competing on performance of the tapioca, price, or what's the market positioning for Taiwan's product here?
Overall, I think if you look at all our portfolio, so we've got more than 100 core SKUs, at least 300 secondary SKUs. I think the product portfolio is strong. And that comes through R&D and product development. But secondly is distribution. So I think our distribution is strong. It's one of our core capabilities. So today we can distribute directly to, I think we do like 10,000 tons into China every month. But more than 10,000 tons in China every month, we know exactly where they go. So I think distribution in food is critical, because at the end of the day, you're just moving what people really need from A to B.
And I'm glad you brought up China, because for many American companies that don't do as much business in China as you do, of course, we are in a very interesting time, politically, geopolitically, to say the least. Can you share a little bit about doing business with China?
what has changed when I was first working in Shanghai in 2010 to now is that Chinese talent, whether it's called entrepreneurial talent, managerial talent, business talent, R&D, is truly world class. It's truly world class because you've got a whole generation of our peers and friends who are truly bilingual. I think the Chinese adoption of technology is also very fast, both consumer technology, enterprise technology, and now AI. So I'd say it's really have a long-term view. And I think what we've tried to do is to build a very strong Chinese team that always travels outside China. For example, my Chinese manager, he's great, one of our best talent. We've been with me closely for 7-8 years. I make sure he always comes outside China. So every 2 months, I'll be like, hey, guy, you got to get out. You got to come to Bangkok. Every 2 months, go and walk the plantation in Indonesia. So I think the vision to build Chinese business, obviously you need the local team, but also the local talent. If your local Chinese talent can also have a view and a radar to outside China, they can connect the dots.
How's the culture in the markets that you work in, particularly, Thailand? Not many understand the nuances. You've spent significant time there. I know, soon you'll be in Singapore and all that. That's a little bit more multinational. But when you think about the talent pool, do we have the level of talent pool that is required to scale an Asian multinational to be truly global?
I think accommodating the different talent mixes and accommodating the different nationalities and how they harmonize is also important. A very simple point in time, my Chinese team really thinks my Southeast Asian team is too slow.
Really?
But China in the last 10 years is faster than everyone else, right? So
yes.
a case in point would be what the Chinese team would want things in 6 hours. The Thai team, they'll think, they'll take 2 or 3 days. There's nothing wrong, right?
Yeah.
So speed, cadence, that's one aspect of it. Another shifting change is obviously Thailand's demographic is more challenging than Vietnam, right? So I think the median age for Thailand is probably, already now close to 40 of the workforce. I think Vietnam is in low 30s, 33, 34.
Really? Wow.
So managing our talent is very different, right? Yeah. So in Thailand, we've got some incredible talent who are still in their 50s, who are still strong contributors. We retain, we grow them. But then in Vietnam, we really got to groom a 32-year-old factory manager who's a COVID superstar. So those are the nuances, right? Thailand does have an aging population. Vietnam does have a younger population. So how do you react and how do you structure your talent workforce in line with market needs? You try to do your best to build in the empathy, the harmony, the diversity, so on and so forth.
Yeah.
As we think about shifting towards augmented AI workforces, Gen Z, Gen Alpha, I do think that these so-called traditional cultural norms will not retreat, but I think they will kind of morph into something. Right? Whether you're using a 50-year-old Chinese manager using, DeepSeek, or you're a 30-year-old Indonesian using, ChatGPT, we are moving a lot more into different types of augmented AI, skillforce upgrade. So I think the AI part, it won't eliminate, cultural norms and values. But if companies can think about harnessing them well in a relatively, thoughtful way, you create a lot more horizontal capabilities. For example, we just did a Google Gemini training across the board. So regardless of age, regardless of nationality.
So let's talk a little bit about Taiwan's journey. Most of us that know the company almost have this impression of the noodles and the starch, right? But of course, you're building it to be truly a bio player, a regional impact player. Give us a sense of what you've done in the last couple of years since you took on reins and where you see it going.
I think we are kind of like end of phase one of transformation, right? And one thing I didn't know is that transformation takes so long. But then again, remember, we are in our 77th year. Right now, we've got over 100 SKUs across all food and starch solutions. Whereas in the past, we only had maybe about 20 or 30. So I think over the next 10, 50 years, Taiwan's heritage as a food company will hopefully evolve into broader infrastructure across the circular economy. And the circular economy, in its essence, is really just food, energy, and water. Asia will always be our roots, so our reach and our distribution is very much global. But I think building on the foundations that we now operate in 7 countries across Asia Pacific, we want to continue to do that.
Who's the major buyer? Is it among the 7 countries right now?
China about 20% of our sales. Thailand's about 30% of our sales. Vietnam is about 10% of our sales. And then Indo and India are still growing. So it's quite diversified. I mean, our manufacturing footprint is a bit more configured to local supply chain. But our customer footprint is relatively diversified.
Yeah, and can you give us a sense of numbers here, like revenues?
So this year will be about $500 million Singapore dollars, so about 11-12 billion baht.
You sent me an article that you wrote about the 25 years. It's prescient that you speak about energy, water, and food, right? So talk to us, a little bit about how you're thinking about innovation. I know you mentioned that innovation is born out of friction, right? And you need to also differentiate between power and energy. Unpack that a little bit as you think, because that's very much, in my read, your thesis of how you're building.
At a very high level first, at a very macro level, from the second quarter of this century, from 2025 to 2030, I think there are a few super major trajectories, or you can call it mega trends, whatever you call it, right? So obviously one, which you all know, and I think you covered so well in your podcast with some of the different leaders and innovators, is the adoption and the transformation of AI. So that's one clear trend over the next 25 years. It will change business models, workforce, talent. And that was also linked to energy, right? The second thing would clearly be energy mix, right? How do countries, how do companies, how do people use different energy mix, whether it's a constant mix between fossil and renewables. And the third thing would be food security, right? By 2050, we're going to need at least 30-40% more food, and we're going to get at least 50% less polluted and clean water. Then I asked myself, okay, what role can Taiwan play? Right? 25 years from now, how can Taiwan be different? How can Taiwan be differentiated? How can Taiwan be valuable to this overall thesis? So you supply over, probably at least, 2 or 3 million, food consumers, B2B, B2C across the entire region, because we're mainly B2B. We take in so much water for processing, freshwater, wastewater treatment. We have so much circular economy in our solutions, looking at the range of energy solutions from boilers to biogas to HVAC cooling to solar BESS. So I see us evolving over the next 25 years from just being singular lines of business, but probably multiple lines of business, all within the circular economy.
Talk to me a little bit about how do you actually implement new frontiers? You've set even ambitious goals, right? So not only new frontiers, but renewable energy and then net zero with your industrial work. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Well, first of all, I think if you look at the broader scope of Taiwan today, I would say probably about at least 30 to 40% of our revenue wasn't there 10 years ago. So not just in the renewable side, but even our core business. We built a direct distribution team in China. We launched a factory in Cambodia. We acquired a few new assets. So constantly, if I'll say for traditional brick and mortar businesses to transform over time, you need to create new revenue. So it took a while, right? But over 7-8 years, we just built 30-40% of new revenue, new markets, new adjacencies. In regards to innovation, it's primarily around, testing and prototyping. So we've been launched our tapioca-based bioplastics ROSECO about 4 years ago. The first phase was just piloting with customers. We used the tapioca-based bioplastic to do shrink film, mulch film, kind of flexible based packaging. And now we're starting to launch it commercial scale, close to about 100 tons a month. So like all things, I think, we can build new revenue streams, new adjacencies, new countries. But something like ROSECO, it really took, at least a multi-year effort to start from a pilot, and then you scale it. And then, as I mentioned, because Taiwan's distribution system is strong, we can then implement it, on a much larger scale.
Yeah. You wear multiple hats. You are not only an amazing father, a leader of a public listed company.
Actually, the father's the only hat. Yeah.
The father's the only hat. Everything else is like...
The rest is a job.
Okay, fair enough. All right, fair enough. So you've recently joined the advisory board for the Rockefeller Foundation. And of course, you know that we had the president of the Rockefeller Foundation who talks about the big bets mindset thinking, Raj Shah. Talk to us a little bit about what your goals are here and what you hope to achieve by your leadership in the Asia board.
So I think, first of all, RF Rockefeller is an incredible institution, right? An institution that endures for decades and over a century. Not many there are. So I think, I've known Dipali, head of Asia, for a few years, and she's outstanding. She's based in Bangkok. And I think what Rockefeller Asia is trying to do is really galvanize a lot more programs. So from a content perspective and how they shape Rockefeller's programming and content partnerships, I think from a Taiwan perspective, even Bayern perspective, I can add a lot. And second of all, I think from a leadership perspective, as the organization thinks about being a 200-year-old organization, hopefully I can play a part in, adding some of that and how they, work with new talent, how they work with new partnerships. Whether it's Rockefeller Foundation or some of the other leading global foundations, they have a very important role to play, right? Because I think so much of what's happening in the world right now, whether it's at the long tail of philanthropy or it's around sustainability and impact, it's really on deployment. right? Getting it to the last mile, to farmers, to schools, to hospitals, to healthcare. It's really about deployment. I mean, AI is like just one part of the world. You got the invisible frontier model, but deployment at the last mile of improving lives, hospitals, rural communities, factories, canals. I think that's very important. And just play a part. And I think what inspires me about them is that they built an incredible institution. I mean, so it's over a 100-year-old institution that will last to 200 years.
Yeah, and it's interesting that they've spent a lot more time now, a lot of the foundations from the US in Asia and also engaging philanthropists. Of course, this is at a time we're in Singapore where the growth of family offices has skyrocketed, right, with the wealth that has been generated here. Talk to us a little bit about, where you see Southeast Asia in the context of playing a role in philanthropy, playing a role in wider impact.
I was just at Milken over the last week, where I participated in a couple of the both the CROSA open door roundtables around philanthropy, sustainable investing, food security. Southeast Asia is a catalyst around blended finance. So in that theme, or whether it's around agriculture, food and water, is one big area where Southeast Asia can be extremely relevant to the rest of the world. Companies or governments have to be aware is over the next 10 years, it's fundamentally around AI and jobs at a very high level, right? So if you think about, technology, everyday hyperscaler, I mean, AI is coming globally. But I do think, thinking about jobs is probably the most important point. What we have achieved the last 10 years is suddenly openness to trade, cross-border FDI, consumer technologies everywhere. So South Asia, I would say, is decently prospered in the last 10 years. And I think the average growth rate has been about 5.5%. But over the next 10 years, whether we can achieve 2%, 3%, 4%, and a certain social cohesion with the large countries, Singapore is an exception as a city-state, but Indonesia, Thailand, Malaysia, it's really about jobs, right? Can we ensure broad-based employment? How do we help the rural communities? How do we have that? So that, I think, will be the, 10 years from now, if I say, how did we fail in Southeast Asia, it would be we weren't able as a region to collectively ensure that, at different segments, jobs were provided. Then again, there are many ways you can overcome it. It won't be a single government alone. It will be governments, corporates, AI governance is going to be very important. Technology distribution is going to be very important.
Yeah.
But I'm hopeful.
We are ready for billion-dollar moves from you. You've been making some billion-dollar moves, but let's unpack more. So, pick three.
Three?
Yeah,
okay.
Card game.
What's one thing you wish you knew earlier about wealth or investing? It's a bit nuanced, but I'll say investing, right? Because I think wealth is investing, right?
Yeah.
Investing is ultimately compounding for a long period of time. I think the one thing I knew earlier, maybe comes with a bit more, melancholy, a bit more white hair, is to understand the different time horizons of what you're trying to achieve. So if you're building a project, it could be 2 years. If you're hiring a CFO, it could be 5 to 7 years. If you're trying to set a legacy, it could be 50 years, not 25. So I would say that, and it probably came at that age, and also listening to a lot of mentors, your podcast included, and it's just that I have a stronger conviction now that whatever I'm trying to do in building for the next generation in long term, there are different time horizons.
Okay, next one.
What hidden quality sets you apart as an entrepreneur? I think in recent years, I think I have a much stronger capacity to synthesize. Again, it's our space as well, right? That means connecting the dots across industries, thinking on different time horizons, depending on what you want to achieve. Right? When do you direct? When do you delegate? When do you influence? And also listening a lot. Follow your podcasts. Listen to some of the best podcasts in the US. And podcast is the best way of auditory learning, right? Because you just in the gym and you're just oh yeah, Sarah said this and someone said that, and you're learning. So I think that capacity to synthesize is more important. I'll even add, I think with AI is even more important because AI is just throwing everything at you.
Yeah.
Right? And it's boom, they give something. But what are you trying to synthesize? What's the essence of what do you want to achieve in a conversation, in a project, in a strategy? I think that's something that is probably there, but I'm trying to develop it more over time.
Love it.
Yeah. Last one.
Question from you.
A counterintuitive lesson you've learned as an investor and an entrepreneur. 7-8 years ago, an Australian CEO told me when I was starting my journey, and I was probably 33, 34, I said, okay, I'm a new CEO, got this idea, and standard playbook, right? So vision, strategy, talent. Set the vision, align the strategy, choose your talent, right? And I was first year newbie rookie CEO playbook. And obviously with that, there's so many ups and downs and hits and misses and crises. It says, go slow to go fast. And again, depending on time horizon. It's counterintuitive because yes, we need to hustle, we need to execute, we need to, act with urgency. You got to be strategically patient.
Yeah.
But sometimes you got act of urgency.
Yeah.
So it's that balance of approach.
Love it. Okay. Final few quick ones from me that I'm not letting you off the hook, so no leaving to chance. Most valuable lesson your parents taught you?
My dad certainly taught me the power of conviction. I think my dad has, has been through a lot, both in his public life and private life. He's actually a journalist. He actually went to jail in Singapore. So he's got a very, very colorful life. But he's always clear in developing his hypothesis and thesis. I think the power of conviction. Like you believe something, you set out to do it. You may change your mind. You may be wrong, but you have the power of conviction. My mom, I would say, has an incredible ability to synthesize across a range of topics. Obviously, on the social front, the one she brings that to the social and human capital for Biotree Group, her public sector work, her travels. She's probably the most bilingual person I know. Like she can just boom, English speech in 7 minutes and then write a Chinese poem. So the power of synthesis with my mom's biculturalism, bilingualism, and my dad's conviction, I think, had a very lasting impact.
I noticed a pattern in your family. There's the chemist side, right? The very scientific. And then there's the journalism. There's the poet. Of course, your wife is a screenwriter.
Yeah.
So there's always a yin. Thank God. There's a yin and the yang in many ways.
Yeah.
How has, I guess, switching, influenced your thinking? And when you think about your mom and your dad, right? Your mom always said she was marrying a journalist, and then she ended up also becoming a significant politician here in Singapore. Talk to us a little bit about the multifaceted nature of your family and how that has influenced you, I suppose.
The opposites attract, right?
Yeah, there must be a yin and a yang, yes.
Maybe it's fortuitous, serendipitous. Maybe it's kind of my in-laws. I made a joke at my wedding. My father-in-law was one of Singapore's leading, economists and private equity at that period of time. And my mother-in-law was a poet.
Yeah, leading literary.
So it's exactly between literary.
Star, yes.
So maybe there's that generational subliminal influence about diversity, about curiosity. But with switching, I think certainly it's a very big impact, right? I think switching has been so influential in many ways as a wife and as a mom and how raising our family, and in so many profound ways, emotionally and even spiritually. Her career and her professional intellectual focus and my business, investing, multi-generational, it's certainly been very harmonizing, right? Because I think there's intellectual curiosity on both sides. Like I talk about management and human drama, and she relates, right? Because she could be writing about a particular character, about a particular plot. I think her work is fascinating. She's a writer, producer, she's working on major projects, but there always be people issues, people drama, plot drama that happen in the same way.
The plot thickens.
So in the same way, I think there's a certain diversity. I think that blends, and there's a certain curiosity applies to how we raise our kids as well. So we've got 2 kids. Rocket's 10. Sonnet is 7, turning 7 soon. And we just hope that they can be, as curious and as diverse as possible. And right now, they're just going through, we just let them do everything, right?
Yeah.
Sports, to literature, to music. So to me, that's been a real blessing. The choice of your life partner, your parents, just providing the environment for diversity and curiosity is important.
Let's end here. I guess as we think about the next 25 years, right? $1 billion moves is all about thinking in a scale that is multi-billion, multi-generational. And I wonder, as you think about your own legacy, your own imprint in the business, in the family legacy, what would that be? What would that look like?
It's less about the number. I mean, both businesses are relatively sizable in a certain way. For Biotree and Taiwan, I would say the final legacy that not just myself and my siblings, Ren Hua, because Ren Hua is now deputy CEO of Biotree, and my brother's leading corporate for Biotree. So it's not just me; it's the generation of my siblings and the next generation. I would say I'll define it less by numbers, because I do believe the numbers or the wealth and the revenue will come. But I would say we define it by scale, by impact, and by new frontiers. When I started Taiwan, it was probably 2.5 times smaller. It was like 4 billion baht. Today it's 10 billion baht. So it took a long time, but at least we've almost doubled 2.5 times the business. In the next 10 or 20 years, maybe we will double, triple, quadruple, but I'm not so concerned about the number because the number will come. It's more we continue to drive scale. Same thing for Biotree, right? We had 20 hotels, 50 hotels. We may not get 200 hotels, but we do things differently. Smaller resorts, eco-lodges, boutique, new revenue stream. But we need scale in a meaningful way, right? To be values-driven, to keep the company feeling small. Impact certainly, right? Because, tourism, food, it's everyday life, like literally everyday life. So the impact that we can drive in communities, the impact we can rejuvenate, the impact we can touch people's lives is certainly part of it. So I think scale and impact, we hope to continue to build on what my parents had pioneered, but also to drive it in a transformational way over a long period of time. Yeah. But finally, the last point is new frontiers. And this is where, going back to the point of, if we get to 2050, what does the world look like? There's just so many unknowns, right? As I mentioned, I think the confluence of AI, climate, and geopolitics will be very, very profound. Like we can't even begin to imagine today what 2050 look like. I hope our legacy is to build significant platforms. It's not a number. It's not about double, triple, 10. It's about just that ethos of scale and impact, such that the next generation can create a lot more, new frontiers. Whether it's a brand new like decarbonization business, it's a brand new recycling business, is launching a whole new sustainable clothing brand. I mean, there are just so many possibilities.
Yeah.
But I think the idea of new frontiers is important because I go back to my own philosophy of life and leadership. It's about time. Right? Can I do something which is meaningful enough, impactful enough, so that unlock another 10, 20, 30 years? We create enough scale.
You build a platform to be able to do that.
Yeah.
Wow. Ren Hua, building new frontiers in Asia and beyond. Thank you so much for your time on Billion Dollar Moves. And we can't wait to see the next 35, 50 years
50
of
years.
your Billion Dollar Moves.
And then we'll be on the moon.
That's right. High five. You did
Thanks.
it. Love
Thanks,
it.
Sarah.
Here's what I'm taking away from this conversation and what I think every leader, investor, and family office should sit with. Number 1, time horizons matter. Ren Hua plans in decades. Most of us plan in quarters. But if you're building anything that needs to survive shocks, climate, geopolitical risks, liquidity cycles, you need a 10, 20, even 30-year lens. Number 2, distribution is destiny. In agri-food, in tech, in capital, the ability to move product, data, or money faster and more intelligently than anyone else will be the competitive moat. Taiwan's China-ASEAN distribution engine is a reminder: great products die without great distribution. Number 3, leadership is forged in crisis. COVID exposed supply chains, governance, and culture. But Ren Hua's response, I can lose money, but I will not lose a life, is the kind of values-based leadership that compounds trust over decades. Number 4, inclusive growth isn't philanthropy, it's strategy. Farmer livelihoods, factory modernization, circular production, these are not nice to have. They're the only way to build resilient supply chains and long-term margin. And finally, number 5, ASEAN is indeed the future of food, energy, and water. If you're an allocator looking for the next multi-decade investment frontier, here's where it's at. Half the world's food system transition will run through this region, and the next winners will be the builders who understand both local nuance and global demand. From family roots to future foods, from starch to sustainability, Ren Hua's journey is a masterclass in long-term thinking, disciplined reinvention, and building with purpose, and I'm so proud to have him as my friend and mentor. This is Sarah Chen-Spellings signing off from Singapore. Until the next one, keep making your billion-dollar moves.